this webinar. I'm Haris Lepiridis. I'm an infrastructure specialist here at GPOBA, and I will be moderating as well as presenting in this webinar. I will be joined by my colleague Silva Stresta, who is a water and sanitation specialist based in Kathmandu, to discuss the experiences that we had from the Nepal solid waste management project, which applied results-based financing, which applied a very interesting results-based approach that we would like to discuss with you. This webinar series is a part of a series that here at GPOBA we conducted together with the World Bank Open Learning Campus to introduce innovative financing mechanisms that actually contribute to development solutions by linking needs, objectives, and actual results achieved to serve low-income communities who otherwise would go unserved. In this webinar, we're going to discuss solid waste management, and by having Silva, who is joining us from Kathmandu, we'd like also to bring the local, the experience on the ground from the country. I would like to invite you all to, once you have questions, to be able to participate through the chat that is provided through the platform. And also, if you have any technical issues or any other problems, also feel free to contact us through the chat, and we have a team that will be able to support and address any of these problems. Without further ado, I would like to go directly into the presentation. So, in this presentation, we will discuss the experiences that we had in a very interesting project that we developed here at GPOBA, at the Global Partnership on Output-Based Aid, a center for expertise for results-based financing in Nepal, focusing on solid waste management, and which actually fell into the broad spectrum of mandate that we're having at GPOBA as a center for expertise for results-based financing in order to match certain development needs with basic financing challenges. And when I'm talking about development needs, I'm talking about the fact that there is a need to match the unserved population in rural and peri-urban areas across developing countries that have constrained public budgets in order to support access to basic services like water and electricity, and weak institutional and technical capacity to match it with the global network of development partners that try to maximize finance for development in the context of leveraging private sector expertise as well technical capacity, and identifying schemes that flip the dialogue of the traditional financing model, which is input-based, towards an output-based model that actually supports efficiencies, the development of efficiency on the ground, supports new accountability measures by linking results by linking funding to actual results achieved, and also providing the type of confidence that is required to investors, overall the private sector community, as well as donors, to go and invest in this community. We have an approach with regard, we always try to develop projects that have an issue, can be scalable, can be replicated across different contexts, but also maintain a certain level of flexibility in order to address the issues on the ground. And I think in this kind of context, the issue of solid waste management is solid waste management experiences are particularly interested. And at GPOBA, we have developed a series of knowledge products that address the role of results-based financing in the context of solid waste management. And when I'm talking about results-based financing, I'm talking about pay-for-success schemes that, like the one that you will be seeing here at this webinar, incentive-based mechanisms, schemes that address behavior, that relate to behavior change in local communities, but also schemes that have an interesting financial structure. And in this context, I think it will be very interesting to see to discuss the experience of Nepal in 5 cities in this webinar. So I would like you to draw your attention to these publications that we have developed, especially here at the Global Partnership on Outbased State on results-based financing for solid waste management, as well as the knowledge note that we drafted that addresses the experience that we had in 2 projects, this project in Nepal as well as another one in West Bank comparatively. So this is a good resource for those interested to follow up from this webinar, and we're always feel free to contact us here at GPOBA in case there is a need to, and we will be happy to support you with our expertise on the sector. Development challenges in solid waste management are, I would say, very well documented across the practitioners and are felt by local authorities and local communities every day. The role of urbanization and the gaps in terms of in infrastructure exacerbate this problem. As countries grow, as cities grow, more and more waste are generated, and this becomes a burden for local authorities and communities to manage the waste sustainably. It's a key issue in regards to countries that we are working at the World Bank, less developed countries, is the issue of collection and disposal. It's around 30 to 60% of solid waste management in cities still remains uncollected, which poses a hazard, of course, for human health, the environment, and the local economies. In this context, the people that are mostly affected are the people that don't have access to these services, or people that are marginalized in the context of living in cities. So there's a clear need in terms of actions that need to be taken. There is also a very strong linkage with solid waste of climate change, considering the fact that methane has a global warming potential 21 times more than carbon dioxide, that many people are usually discussing in the context of solid waste management, of climate change and the reduction and mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions. So, of course, solid waste management is not an easy subject to discuss. That's the reason that we would like to have the opportunity to discuss with you this approach that we have taken in Nepal, this very interesting approach that we have taken in Nepal, that has produced also some remarkable results that we feel that we could be replicated and scaled to different contexts. It's an approach that tackles, on the one side, the financial sustainability, considering, addressing a basic issue that is faced across municipalities across the world, which have spent usually 20 to 50% of their budget just on solid waste management. So this project was designed in order to address this issue, but also addressed issues related to the sustainable waste management of municipal solid waste through a series of measures that have been taken across the course of across the development of the project to make sure that practices such as composting, recycling, and proper collection are taken into consideration in the management plans of municipalities. Across sectors, including solid waste management, the low willingness to pay and the affordability of services is very important. We try to address it as strongly as possible. And also in this kind of context, Silva will be discussing with you how the issue of solid waste management fees and the collection of solid waste management fees has been addressed. Without further ado, I would like, I provided this type of general context. I would like to pass it to my colleague Silva in Kathmandu, to give us, to analyze us and provide a description about the project in Nepal, and we'll be coming back to you with questions and answers. And again, I would like to stress with you the opportunity to pose your questions in the chat. Silva, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Charles. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. It's a pleasure to talk about the output-based aid project for municipal solid waste management in Nepal, which we tried as a pilot in 5 municipalities, three very small municipalities and 2 reasonable-sized municipalities in Nepal. The project started in 2013 and closed in 2017. The objective was to improve access to high-quality and financially sustainable solid waste management services in the municipalities. And we had 2 central-level agencies working with us, the Town Development Fund, which was the fiduciary agent, and the technical implementing partner was the Solid Waste Management Technical Support Center. Collection and disposal of operation of solid waste management is very inefficient in many municipalities, which are understaffed, ill-equipped, and fiscally strapped, and they have very little incentives to perform. It is estimated that Nepal in total generates about 700,000 tons of waste per year, and less than half of it is collected, and whatever is collected is again disposed very haphazard manner. So the composition of waste in Nepal is about 65% organic, 25% recyclable, and about 10% inert materials. The main challenge is ensuring a financially viable and sustainable model for municipal solid waste management while improving services in tandem with the growing quantities of waste. Improving cost recovery and service quality are intricately linked challenges which we try to address through this project. So the project in a snapshot would be like, the whole objective was to improve service quality and financial sustainability of whatever is put in place. And in doing that, we were trying to support the operational improvements to enhance the services, increase the willingness to pay by the citizens by showing that there is improved qualities of services, and provide grant-based subsidies to the municipalities, but based only upon the performance. So the municipalities take the performance risk. How it works is that the services must meet the technical standards that are set before any payments are made, and the subsidy is paid on the basis of the revenue that is collected by the municipalities, which can be directly linked to the solid waste management. And the other key features of the project included that the municipalities were given the discretion on how to deliver the services, because it was not one size fit all model. All the municipalities had different challenges, so we had a very tailored and differentiated approach for each of the municipalities. Independent verification triggered subsidy payments, and technical assistance was provided to support implementation. And there was a key role for the central agencies, the Solid Waste Management Technical Center and the Town Development Fund. So with that, we had three very core components of the project. The first one dealing with the service delivery subsidies to bridge the gap between what is available with the municipality and how they needed to get to a certain service level. And this subsidy again diminished over the project cycle. Initially, the subsidies are quite high, but then it gradually diminished. So we'll go through an example with about that in a moment. Then implementation support in the form of technical assistance was also provided to the municipalities to plan for the improved service delivery with a strong focus on the 3R principles. We also had some money set aside for the verification of outputs, both for technical and financial, the project audits, and project management, monitoring, and evaluation. There were three steps in the project cycle. The first one was planning and preparation, where the municipalities were provided support through the Solid Waste Management Technical Support Services Center to prepare a solid waste management service improvement plans. And like I said earlier, this was tailored to very specifically to each of the municipalities' own needs and the baselines that they were starting from. Then the municipalities also prepared plans on how they were going to collect the revenues from the beneficiaries. The idea was they would gradually improve the services and also increase the revenue, the tariff simultaneously, so that they could reach to a level where it becomes much more financially sustainable. The center and the town development fund would look at these plans, and then they would agree on the targets, which would be the basis for measuring the service quality. And based on that, tripartite agreements were signed between the municipality, the center, and the town development fund. The next very critical step of it was the actual implementation of the service improvement plans, where the municipalities pursued their service delivery models based according to their plans, and which with strong focus on service revenue collection. The beneficiary revenues were collected, and designated service solid waste management fees were collected. And the independent technical verification agents would assess the quality of the services against the technical scorecards which were annexed to the service improvement plans. Only the municipalities that received the passing score would be then eligible to receive the subsidy. The final step on this was the financial verification and the payment. The municipalities would have to maintain a separate account of the revenues they collected from the solid waste management fees. And the independent financial verification agent would verify the beneficiary revenues. The project would then pay a matching subsidy grant based on the pre-agreed multiple of the amount that was collected by the municipalities. But again, we would here stress that the subsidy would be paid only if the services and were according to the technical scorecard, and the municipalities received the passing score. So the whole institutional arrangement for this was at the center, the Solid Waste Management Center and the Town Development Fund providing the technical support and the subsidy. The participating municipalities would provide municipal solid waste management services to the beneficiaries, the households, and the businesses. The independent technical verification agents and the independent financial verification agents would do the verifications. So this was a very simple arrangement for the implementation of the project. So overall, Nepal in the municipalities of Nepal, there was just like two ways of paying for the solid waste management services. One was the own source revenue that the municipalities would have, and the government subsidy. So the whole idea was to increase the revenue of the municipalities so that they would be less reliant on the other revenue bases that the municipality had, and would be able to provide better services. So over the years, as you would here see, although the government subsidy would remain more or less same, the output-based aid subsidy would decrease, but the tariff base of the municipality would increase, thereby allowing them to provide better services. If you go by the example of Dhankuta, what we see here is that the revenue base from the solid waste sources was very less for Dhankuta municipality. In year 0, it was 600,000 rupees. In year 1, they increased it by 10% to 700,000, and corresponding to that, if they passed the technical verification and the financial verification, they would be eligible to receive 3.5 million rupees. In the subsequent years, the subsidy amount decreased from 3.5 to 2.9 to 2.3 million by the end of year 4. But their own revenue would increase from 700,000 to 2.5 million rupees by the end of the last year. And the best part, let me go back. And the best part would be that because once these revenues and the tariffs are set and increased at a gradual rate, this would not be decreased easily, and the municipality would have a steady source of income from the solid waste management by providing solid waste management services to its citizens. And the citizens would be, again, willing to pay because they would see a gradual and the continuous improvement in the services that they are receiving. So the main achievements from the project was both on the behavioral side of the communities, the decision makers, the households, and even how the development partners looked at solid waste management. And from the municipality side, municipal reforms in terms of the financial sustainability of the solid waste management services, and sustainable practices in terms of managing the whole solid waste, which has more repercussions in terms of the environmental issues as well. So Dhankuta was named the cleanest city in Nepal, among the 100 odd municipalities that were graded at that time by the Ministry of Urban Development. It was a big achievement, and the reason they were able to do that was by a lot of recycling and composting, and they have been able to maintain that. Pokhara is opening up the solid waste management to private sector participation and led to benefits to almost 500,000 households, which is 16% of the population. The one very good feature of the Pokhara municipality story is that they have also started on-call solid waste management collection services from the private sector in the commercial areas. In case of Gohrahi and Tansen, recycling and composting became the big story. In case of Tansen, where landfill site management was a big issue, they were able to manage the solid waste by not sending so much of waste into the landfill site, but by recycling a lot of it at source. In case of Lalitpur, the collection of solid waste management fee for the city increased by 400%. Now, the Lalitpur sub-metropolitan city has become a metropolitan city, and the story continues. Continuing on the project achievements, the institutionalization of the solid waste management sector from the policy to the implementation has been a big success, and all the participating municipalities have developed waste management services by developing very specific terms of references for their divisions that do solid waste management. They have waste collection routes and are providing services as per the collection schedule. There's better record keeping of the revenues that are generated from the services, and grievance handling mechanism for the services is much better than in any other sectors that the municipality provides services in. So this has, the project has, like I said earlier, played a very vital role in implementing the policy on source segregation, and we see very good examples of this in case of Thankuta, Tansen, and Gorai more specifically. So this is the success story of Nepal in case of how funds were provided to the municipalities for providing better services in solid waste management, and how the municipalities would themselves provided the capacity to improve on their services. One thing that I would like to mention here is that we were not providing any funds for direct investment in the infrastructure building for the solid waste management services, but it was more focused on providing quality in operations. So we have a few things that we could start our discussions with, and we can also take questions from the floor. Alice, over to you.
Try to give you a comprehensive but brief overview of the project in order to encourage you to ask questions, and I can see already some action in the chat room. In terms of from our perspective at the World Bank and at the Global Partnership on Output-Based Aid, working together in this project, we have identified a couple of messages that we'd like to put into the discussion in terms of moving forward. So let me summarize here. It's already mentioned in the slide, but we feel that the results-based financing approach has a very big potential in order to be replicated, particularly in terms of attracting investors, impact investors in cities, as well as donors that have this risk appetite in order to try more approaches that are, I would say, that challenge the classic input-based traditional development finance model. So the case in Nepal somehow confirms this feeling that we have had from a couple of different projects, but it was the first time that it has been established at this type of scale in a country in South Asia that has a particularly also cultural context. What Silva missed to say is the challenges, some of the challenges that we faced in the implementation of this project, including the devastating earthquake of course, that occurred in Nepal, but also the political and the fuel crisis that somehow, I would say, no, not somehow, I would say, delayed the implementation of delayed the implementation of the project in certain aspects. Silva spoke about subsidies, and this project, particularly in the case of Pokora, but also, I mean, also a little bit in terms of Lalipur, makes the case that targeted subsidies can be an important instrument that can support private sector participation in cities. Of course, the level of sophistication in private sector participation in these cities has nothing to do with the models that we're seeing in Western Europe or in United States, in more developed countries. But in any case, as part of the technical assistance that we provided in this project, we supported the formalization of private sector participation in terms of contracts, agreements, and we hope that this can be provided as a stable and sustainable basis for the future. The technical assistance didn't focus only on hardcore, I would say, contractual issues or, typical capacity building. Had a very strong educational and community outreach component across across all 5 municipalities, which we feel that it is important, and sometimes it's important to be implemented across along investments in cities like the one that Silva has developed, investments in terms of like municipal reforms and behavior change. So sometimes we miss the issue of community outreach and education, but it's extremely important when we're talking about solid waste management fees and incentive based and creating incentives for communities to participate, either in terms of like increasing their composting and recycling, either in terms of like practicing sustainable solid waste treatment in terms of recycling or composting, but also by participating in the system through their contribution in the municipal budget and the reforms in solid waste management fee structures. Usually when we're talking about subsidies, we feel that this is something that targets specific households, but in the case of solid waste management fee, in the case of solid waste management, we feel that we realize that subsidies are actually particularly valuable when need to be addressed in the context of municipal budgets. So we would say that subsidies, I would say it's a community based, can be a community based scheme. And finally, I would like to close with the same message that Silva closed. The fact that solid waste management things it's not always about the big investments in terms of like new landfills, new trucks, new equipment. It's a lot of like it's related a lot to we can achieve more in terms of addressing some of the big development challenges that exist in the sector by supporting municipal reforms as well as behavior change, both with regards to the public, to the local governments and public stakeholders, but also to communities and households. The issue of behavior change and municipal reform is particularly important. These are my concluding messages that I hope provide a context for the discussion that we'll see. I see that we have already a couple of questions. Let me go and read a little bit of some of the questions. Do you want to, Silva, to discuss a little bit about the delivery model? Across the different municipalities and the changes, the characteristics of this municipality. We have a question which relates to what are the different delivery models chosen by the municipalities. So if we can go quickly through.
Like I said earlier, it was a very tailored approach for each of the municipality. In case of Thankuta, it was a combination of more focus on recovery of recyclables and composting of the organic materials at the household level, and that really took off to the extent that in case of Thankuta, the organic waste that went into the landfill site by the end of year 3 became negligible, less than 10%. So that helped a lot in case of landfill site management as well. So while the municipality also increased the area of collection, they were also working very extensively with the communities, with the household, and providing a lot of trainings and awareness to the household for composting and supporting in that. So that really helped in case of Pankuta. In case of Tansin, it was an interesting concept because I also saw a question like if any one of the municipality failed in the technical verification. Tansin did fail the first year because their landfill site was not operational. But the second year, they were able to turn it around to the extent that they did not need so much of waste going into the landfill site, which means by implementing the 3R concept very extensively in the municipality, they were able to reduce the amount of waste going into the landfill site. So the landfill site issue did not become too much of an issue, and they were able to pass the technical verification in year 3 and get the subsidy for the last 2 years of the project. In case of Pokhara and Lalitpur, as Darius said, it was more private sector involvement. In case of Pokhara, it was much more private sector oriented because the municipality was able to have a very good contract with the private sector, which was doing solid waste collection, and get revenues collected from through the private sector, and the private sector was providing the service on behalf of the municipality. In case of Lalitpur, it was a combination of the municipality doing its own collection and some private sector also involved in waste collection and management. There was not much of, unfortunately, there was not much of recycling and segregation happening in these large municipalities. In case of Gorahi, however, there was a lot of emphasis on the recycling. So it was a combination of modalities that each of the municipalities chose for themselves and were able to achieve the targets that they themselves set for themselves. For themselves.
Great. Thanks a lot, Silva. We have another question with regards to how many municipalities actually failed in terms of like meeting our targets. And you mentioned the case of Tansen, which was a particularly interesting case, considering the fact that the kind of like performance criteria that we have developed for the municipalities tackled a series, I would say, three basic issues of the municipalities. The first one was the institutional aspect. And in this kind of case, we wanted municipalities in the first years to establish a structure that somehow oversees the solid waste management practices with designated staff from the municipalities, as long as developing some operations manual for like basic facilities that they are having to manage related to solid waste management, like the disposal side. And it was really unfortunate that the case of Tansen didn't receive the subsidy that was envisaged by the project because of the fact that they didn't operate the landfill site in a way that was acceptable by the standards that we have set, and actually we have agreed upfront in the project. I mean, the municipalities knew about the standards when they decided to join the project. So I think, answering to Andrea's question with regards to how many municipalities didn't get the subsidy as it was across the different cycles of provision. I think the issue of Tansen and the fact that they didn't operate the landfill in a way that along our standards was an interesting case. Then there was an issue there is another question with regards to recycling and how much recycling has increased. And as Silva mentioned, what we have found, what we have realized in terms of the practices on recycling and composting is that this issue was much easier to somehow to incentivize them and to improve them in the three smaller municipalities, Gorai, Tansen, and Dankuta. Silva, do you by any chance have any on the back of your mind the results that were achieved in terms of increasing of recycling and composting rates?
So, in case of Pankuta, the composting like I said earlier, the amount of organic waste going into the landfill site decreased by as much as 90% because the composting was done to that scale. In case of Gorahi, the recovery of recyclables, in case of Gorahi and even in case of Pokhara, the recyclables was recovered to up to 20 to 30% more than where we started from. So those were like remarkable things that we observed under the project. And the municipality was able to.
It's very interesting.
And the municipality was able to generate some more funds by selling those recyclables as well.
And what I would like to stress out on this, and I think it was mentioned in your presentation, is the fact that these numbers and these achievements that we're discussing about, it's not achievements that have been coming from the top of our minds. It's something that came out of the scheme that we put in place in terms of like having some independent technical and financial verification agents that they went and they collected data and they validated data, and based on this data, we provided the subsidy. On the World Bank side, and in terms of the design of the project, we have set the targets, but then it was up to independent verification agents to go and verify whether these targets have been achieved and in what type of extent. So the remarkable results in regards to composting and recycling, composting as long as like 90%, I mean, it's something that is really, it is remarkable and has been verified independently. There is another issue that is particularly interesting on this, with this type of like results-based approaches, and is the issue, the focus on data. And one of the key things that is happening the challenge that we're having in solid waste management is the issue of like collection of data in terms of like benchmarking and and developing informed design, well-designed schemes based on the collection of data that we're having. We feel that one of the contributions of the project moving forward is the issue of like the data collection that has already happened with regards to and verified in the case both on the management of solid waste, but also on the issue of like data from the accounts of the municipalities in terms of the contributions of households on how they achieve. So I think this is a good resource for the municipalities to move forward in terms of like informing their solid waste management schemes. Let me go to some other questions. There is an issue of like with regards to the subsidies. There's a question from Andreas. With subsidies fading down, total amounts, declined overall. That also means less service delivery to those who had previously received the service. What is it? Andreas is somehow tackling here the issue of sustainability that has been on the back of our minds in terms of like how you design a scheme that is sustainable, that will somehow sustain itself after the 5-year period, the 4-year period in this case. When we designed the scheme, and I would like to invite also Silva to comment on this. This was, and you will see it, I think, clearly in the diagram that we presented. We feel that the scheme is sustainable by substituting the level of, by decreasing over time the level of subsidy, increasing thus the willingness to pay of households. The household contribution to the system, and also encouraging at the same time better solid waste management practices. The whole scheme lies on the principle that we developed that as households realize that solid waste management is managed better, will be willing also to continue to support. And as the subsidy has been phased out, there was the role of the governments, the local governments, municipalities, to step in terms of like ensuring that the practices continue to satisfy the standards that have been established by the project, but also it was also to incentivize communities to participate in the system financially. With regards to their fees that are paying for the solid waste. So, we feel that this is a practice that somehow contributes to the financial and environmental the financial stability of municipalities, as well as to the environmental sustainability with regards to how you treat solid waste management. And I don't know if Silva, you would like to add something on this.
I would just like to add that the municipality is committed to increase the tariff by a certain percentage every year, even beyond the project. And it was, while during the project period, it was quite high. Like if you look at the Dhankuta case, it was up to 50% increment year on year. After the end of the project, it was around a nominal increment of less than 10% or around 10%. And a lot of investment that was required to sustain the solid waste management services would be done during the project period, like procurement. They would be buying vehicles for collection of waste from the households, so things like that. They would have done it during the project period. So that really would lessen the burden in the future years, and help the municipalities continue their services and services. So and another question related, which is very related to that has come up, is how did the municipalities finance the required improvements in the infrastructure, given that the subsidies were provided afterwards? But the very interesting thing that we managed to put under the project was, and this was because it was a pilot, we were able to convince the government to agree to this, was uh, uh, the provision of taking an advance from the subsidy. So, so against the service improvement plans that the municipalities signed off and their commitment to increase the revenue, the municipalities were able to request for an advance from the subsidies that they would get in the subsequent years. So, like in year one, Dhankuta would be able to get an advance of up to 50% of what they would get they could get in the subsequent years. So that money they used to put in buy the equipment that they needed to improve their services, things like compactors and collection vehicles. So, and that would be deducted from the subsequent payments of subsidies that the municipalities would get once the financial verification was done. The guarantor for this was the central government. So the central government was also a very good partner in trying out these initiatives. So because none of the municipalities failed, we did not have any default on this.
Silva, do you want also to comment? We had another question with regards to the training and the training that that we provided as part of our technical assistance to the different agents. Do you want to discuss a little bit of like the different components of the training between the solid waste, the role of the solid waste management technical support center and the selected staff in the municipalities? How did this work out?
So there was a question related to how much time it took to institutionalize all this and all the capacity building trainings that went into this. So a series of trainings was provided in the initial years, and because this was such a novel concept and everyone was looking for investments before they started to do anything, show any results, it took quite a bit of time to even get the central level agencies to get up to the terms of this concept. So a lot of workshops, orientations was done at the central level to make them understand about the concept of output-based aid, service first, delivery first, and the money coming later. Then there was trainings to the municipality staff to, again, on the similar concept that you really don't need to invest so much before you can improve on the services. And then once you improve the services, you can get more money. So there was a lot of orientation, training, awareness creation, and more importantly, awareness creation among the households, the citizens, the beneficiaries of the different municipalities on the importance of this, not just in terms of getting the waste out of their households, but managing it so that it becomes a thing of pride for their whole community. And in case of Dhankuta, it's become very remarkable how they are now so proud of their city becoming the cleanest city in the country, being designated the cleanest city in the country. And the newly elected mayor has said that the year after year, he will never let this title, he'll not lose this title. And there were other mayors who challenged him on that. So it's becoming a very interesting thing.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. And we're actually really, really happy to see this. I would say that another issue that I would like to add on the issue of like capacity building and training is the issue of like on how did we choose the partners for this project. No, Silva mentioned in her presentation we had two big partners. I mean, leaving aside the municipalities in this project, the first one was the Town Development Fund, which has the capacity in terms of like financing and understanding of like how financing works in cities in Nepal. But we also have the Solid Waste Management Technical Support Center that has a mandate in order to provide capacity building activities, capacity building and training activities and inform policies with regards to solid waste management in Nepal in general. So the fact that we are providing technical assistance as part of this project to Solid Waste Management Technical Support Center, which is an entity with the mandate to provide training and capacity building in municipalities in Nepal, I think is also something that it was particularly interesting for the project because, first of all, the staff of the Solid Waste Management Technical Support Center were able to support the municipality across the course of the project. I mean, based on the capacity that they already had in terms of informing their policies and good practices, but also it's a very strong it's very interesting with regards to supporting an entity that has the mandate to continue strengthening capacity building in Nepal. So when the technical assistance of the project will finish, we feel that we informed or build capacity within an entity that will continue to operate in Nepal around this agenda. So this is also something interesting. Do you want to discuss a little bit about the job creation and the role of communities that occurred as part of the project? I don't feel that we have monitored it enough as part of our results framework. But having been in Nepal a couple of times with you, of course, there was a lot of activity in the communities, particularly with regards to women creating creating different objects and selling them from recyclables. Also, new jobs with regards to in the municipalities. But I'll leave you to comment on this in terms of creation of jobs.
Yeah. Unfortunately, yes, we didn't have these as indicators under the project, and we didn't monitor these actively. I would not go as far to say that the project went very far in terms of job creation for the small initiative, but in the municipalities where the support was provided, we could see a few households getting really involved in reusing the materials to produce things like baskets and pencils from the recovered materials. So things like that on a very small scale. Again, going back to Thankuta, which continues to become the biggest success story for some reason. There the composting really took off, and quite a few households with the support of the municipality was able to produce compost from the organic materials that were recovered and use them in their own gardens for better productivity in their vegetable gardens, and also sell some of them. We have a case study of one household in Thankuta which began raising earthworms, which are very important for composting, and selling them and making an income of about 50,000 rupees per year. So there are stories of these which we've tried to capture through a few case studies, but I would not go as far to say that there was a massive job creation because of this initiative.
Great. And do you want to discuss a little bit about in regards to the market for composting and how this worked? I think we had a discussion in the chat about this. Okay, we compost, but where do we sell the compost?
So again, where the composting was happening was in these smaller municipalities, and composting was done mostly at the household levels, and so they were consumed mostly at the household level for their own gardens and their own vegetable patches that they had. So it was more management of the organic waste rather than composting for selling.
Okay, very, very good. Thank you. There is any question with regards to behavior change and and how does this work? In order to, and what are the examples that we're having? On this, I would like to draw your attention to the publications that I mentioned up front. It's like I would say it's like a well-written report that addresses experiences that we're having across different countries on the issue of behavior change. It comes across in many of the projects we have developed. The publication discusses experiences in Malaysia, in China, in Jamaica, of course in West Bank, as I mentioned to you. So in order to avoid like going into the details on this, I would draw your attention to the publication. It's called Results-Based Financing for Sustainable for Municipal Solid Waste Management. It's available online at the World Bank website. It has been supported by the Global Partnership on Output-Based Aid. So you can find many of the practical experiences with regards to projects there to the participant that has asked this question. We have a lot of participants from different countries. Mozambique, Zambia, I'm seeing, and I would like to mention also the fact that this webinar will be available after from 24 to 48 hours on the Open Learning Campus of the World Bank. So you can follow up and focus on the details, and feel free to shoot us an email if you have any more questions. Silva, how does, let me take a little bit of lead on this thing in this type of we're just having like 5 minutes more. How does this operation fit with the overall World Bank portfolio in the country? The operation closed last year in June. What do you see the impact of this operation in the overall approach that the World Bank is having and Nepal is having in general in the sector?
Okay. Yeah. So the project closed last year, and right now in the World Bank's portfolio, we are in the process of preparing a new project, a much larger scale project for supporting the urban municipalities. And therein we see a prospect for this kind of approach to be scaled up in the number of towns that we would be supporting for one of the service delivery requirements of the municipal government, which is solid waste management. Other infrastructure can be put in through a traditional infrastructure financing approach, but for better service delivery, this can be a really good way of doing things. So that is under discussion right now, and the country team is also very aware of the successes of this project. So they are very we're really looking forward to ways of doing this. The municipalities are also very interested in this kind of approach, and for everyone, this is like a quick win approach, both for the municipalities as well as for the bank to continue to support the municipalities in terms of continuing the service delivery, which is a challenge. So that takes us to the question that Cameron had on not more than 7,000 municipalities. It's actually 292 urban municipalities and 400 odd rural municipalities. So we see this approach being appreciated by the government, but because we are in such a transitional stage, we have not seen the government, central government, really coming out and said this will be the approach that we will use to incentivize the municipalities to improve their services in solid waste management. But from the bank side, we are trying to, at least in the investments that we would do in future, we will be looking at this very carefully to see how this can be scaled up.
There's a question with regards to the PPP, that is the initiative and the discussion that is about to, that is happening in Kathmandu Valley, and how this project fits with this broader dialogue. I would like to mention that the project, the only municipality that actually is part of the Kathmandu Valley in this project was Lalipur. And most of the municipalities, not almost, the rest of the municipalities were outside Kathmandu, so it was not part of this discussion. I don't know, Silva, if you would like to comment. I'm not sure on the PPP for Kathmandu Valley, but I just want to mention that the project was out of this discussion, considering that only Lalitpur was is participate in the project and is in Kathmandu Valley.
My understanding is that the PPP initiative in the Kathmandu Valley is right now limited to the Kathmandu Metropolitan City Initiative. And that too is limited mostly to the recovery of materials and use of those materials for generation of bioelectricity. If that really takes up, because the landfill site for both Kathmandu Metropolitan and Lalitpur Metropolitan is the same, there would be much more scope for the Lalitpur municipality to also buy into the same initiative. But right now, we do not see that happening too much with Lalitpur.
Great. And the final question, I think we have like 2-3 minutes. I would like to mention, of course, that the report, the project has been already, the project lessons have been captured in the report that I have mentioned, in 2 reports of GPOBA. We're planning with Silva to write another report on the lessons learned from this project, specific for this project. So stay tuned for more insights with regards to this project. Silva, we have just 2 minutes and closing on this thing. How do you see, I would like to say, from your experience at the bank and in the ground, how do you see this project being replicated, scaled up? Do you see, I would like to close with a general question. Do you see a value of these results-based approaches in a country that is in the context of development of a country like Nepal?
I would say that especially in this transitional phase, approaches like this, the scaling up becomes much more important, critical, as well as feasible, because you can do this with limited resources and you can show results more quickly instead of having to spend so much time putting in infrastructure. So this will be like the incremental improvements that the citizens, the beneficiaries can see very directly, very quickly happening. And so there actually is a lot of scope for this. The question is in the big discussion that is going on, like on the federalism transition, the need for a lot of infrastructure, a lot of financing, whether this the whole area of solid waste management will take a backseat, or whether this where we are not saying that we will get funds at the very beginning and everyone is looking for funds and resources right now, whether this will whether the local municipalities would have the appetite to take the chance, the performance risk, as we say, right away, because that will continue to be a challenge.
Of course. So I think we ran out of time. I would like to thank you all for participating and being engaged in this discussion. It was a real pleasure to be with Silva and discussing the experiences of this project. Stay tuned for more webinars from the Global Partnership on Output-Based Aid, discussing our experiences with pilot and innovative mechanisms that bring this results-based financial component. The solid waste management is very, very close to my heart, and I'm particularly happy that I had the opportunity to, and this project was very, very close to me. So I'm particularly happy that I had the opportunity to discuss this with Silva and with all of you. And with that, again, I would like to thank you, and feel free to communicate, to reach out to us if you would like to further more clarifications on this. Thank you very much. Thank you, Silva. Thank you all for making this webinar happen. Bye.
Thank you, and it was a pleasure.